This video was originally uploaded on July 25th, 2023, and has been recut and re-edited in order to be more compliant with YouTube's copyright regulations. Thanks for watching and enjoy. I want to talk about Darkman today. It's a strange movie. Not the movie itself, the movie's fine, but we'll get into that later. But it's weird in that it basically came in, caused a bit of a stir at the box office, was generally well received by critics, and it was somewhat popular for a while, and then it just kind of went away. It's a good movie, but unlike, say, RoboCop, which is a very similar concept, it hasn't really reached the later generations in the same way. The 80s and 90s were weird. It was kind of before superhero movies were commonplace, and it was way before they decided that every superhero movie needed to be part of a shared universe and have this grander scale where each movie was just an advertisement for the next movie. Prior to the MCU, superhero movies were basically just either, something like Batman, where a director took the characters, took the property, and put their own unique spin on it, or alternatively, they were like Darkman or RoboCop, where it was a unique experience that was created by a writer, and it was meant to emulate a comic book, but was a whole original deal. Sam Raimi created Darkman after he was denied the chance to direct a movie based on The Shadow in the 90s, so he said, fuck it, I'll make my own superhero. It stars Liam Neeson as Peyton Westlake, a scientist working on a prosthetic skin for burn victims. Frances McDormand plays his fiancée, and Larry Drake plays crime boss Robert G. Durant. The movie takes elements of the Phantom of the Opera and the Elephant Man and puts it into a 90s action film. That is a fucking weird sentence I just said. It's a spectacle of a movie. It has all those Sam Raimi tropes, but it also manages to be a fun and exciting action movie with a tragic lead character. Looking at the style and themes, and even Danny Elfman doing the score, this is essentially a precursor to the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies in terms of style and execution. Sam Raimi has had a very interesting career. Evil Dead was a hit, and then he did Crime Wave, which almost destroyed his career, and he was able to bounce back with the part remake, part sequel Evil Dead 2, and then Darkman was his first directorial gig following Evil Dead 2, as well as his first director job with a major Hollywood studio. It showed that, while his style worked for horror, it could also be applicable to an action film. And honestly, the style itself is what makes the movie work. It feels like a comic book, the camera work, the acting, it's serious when it needs to be, and over the top when it wants to be. The editing and the over-the-top scenarios played completely straight. Raimi captured the feel of a comic book to a T, and he didn't even need to borrow a pre-existing property to do it. Liam Neeson at this point was a known actor and was a studio choice, as Sam Raimi initially wanted Bruce Campbell to play Peyton Westlake, but for some reason in the early going studios were reluctant to cast Bruce Campbell in anything or let Sam Raimi cast him in anything. He wanted Bruce in the lead for Crime Wave, and the studio was like, no, which may have actually saved Bruce Campbell's career, so that's fine. But I don't get this. Everyone loves Bruce Campbell now, so what the fuck was the problem back then? Darkman is a very standard story. Scientists working in his lab, thugs show up looking for some legal documents that his fiancée had that impedes with their business. They kill his lab assistants and blow him the fuck up. He survives, but the doctors who fixed him did an experimental procedure where they sever part of his brain that processes pain, but also any other sensation. His brain compensates for this by jacking up his adrenaline and making his emotions go haywire, so naturally he decides to go on a quest for revenge. The supporting cast for Darkman is fucking great. Larry Drake plays a great villain, although in this case he is not the main villain. You're led to believe he's the main villain, which, spoilers, you're watching a review, you should expect spoilers, but Larry Drake is more so of a Clarence Boddicker to Colin Friel's Dick Jones type character. Basically, Larry Drake's character, Robert G. Durant, works for a corporate suit, Louis Strack, who wants to buy up all this land to do his big corporate development project, and god, they predicted something with Toronto here. I absolutely love the way they introduce the villains in this. The first scene, before the credits even roll, you're introduced to Durant and his weird crew of criminals. They're like a criminal enterprise, but there's no real gimmick here. There's like, it's all nationalities welcome, except there's no black people. Like, the way it starts is with them confronting a criminal named Eddie Black, aka the cop from Boys in the Hood, and there's a whole thing where Eddie Black does not want to move off his docks, and he's being a dick about it. So Durant has a plan where they pull off Skip's wooden leg and blow everybody the fuck away. But what caps this off to make Durant perfect is that while he's doing all this, he's just got this neutral look on his face, and then when they finally corner Eddie Black, you get to see his sadistic side. He acts cold and calculating, but he's just a sick fuck. He starts cutting off his fingers with a cigar cutter. So yeah, he keeps fingers, so he's a crime boss, but he's got those serial killer tendencies, and I absolutely love this scene so much. Like, his little speech to Eddie Black is just like, this whole thing is just a great hook.
I've got 7 more points.
Like, Robert G. Durant is one of my top movie villains of all time. He's so evil, but instead of being over the top, he's more low-key with it. He does get a little over the top later on, but all of this, the fact that he downplays it, shows a lot of restraint on Sam Raimi's part, because judging by his Spider-Man movies, he loves to make his villains ham it the fuck up. Durant is cold. He has layers to him as well. For one, the aforementioned serial killer tendencies, as well as the fact that it's strongly suggested that he's banging the young twink of the group, Rick, played by Ted Raimi.
Hey, Durant wants to know where Rick is, and he is hot. I mean, really hot. I mean, don't ask me why. I know he likes Ricky. Paulie, do you know where the hell Rick is?
Durant makes for a good villain, not because he's gay, but just because Larry Drake is a great actor. Seriously, he's got so much range. It took me years to realize he played the killer Santa in the Tales of the Crypt episode and All Through the House. He's quiet, but when he gets loud, he gets loud.
Well, that explains his disappearance.
Hey, I don't know nothing about that! Where is the money, Paulie?
Of course, a great villain is nothing without his henchmen, and Durant's henchmen are solid and memorable too. You got Raimi regular Dan Hicks playing Skip, who sadly had a lot of his scenes cut, including his death scene, and the rest of the henchmen are played by various late 80s, early 90s character actors. You got the guy from Wayne's World, you got a Latino guy, you got a big bald guy. They're distinct, they do well in their roles, but they do not take away from the main players. But I guess I have to talk about the lead. Liam Neeson's pretty good. He worked under the makeup well and was able to portray the emotional turmoil that the Darkman character is suffering. Sure, he goes over the top, but it's warranted.
Maybe I should be wearing a funny little hat. Do you like it? Yeah? Yeah? See the dancing freak. Pay $5 to see the dancing freak. Only $5.
And Frances McDormand does well as all. She's not really a huge part. She plays more or less a damsel, but she does well with it. And I want to give a shout out to Colin Friels because he's an actor that I've seen in 2 movies I really like. This and Dark City. And I was like, why does he use like an old style New York accent?
You truly are one ugly son of a bitch!
And I did some reading and found out that he's Scottish, but he grew up in Australia. So the fact that he can sound remotely American is very impressive because, like, people from the UK really don't hit that. There's a tease that he's gonna end up with Julie, but then we find out that he's the true villain of the movie just before the final act, so he kinda sweeps in out of nowhere. Honestly, when he finally gets to be a villain, he plays it the fuck up. And I actually did some reading. There were scenes that were kinda meant to show the Strack character in a negative light. There was a weird scene where apparently he dumped a bunch of gold coins on his bed and started like rolling around in them naked and acting weird, which was meant to kind of set up that he wasn't quite right in the fucking head, but apparently test audiences did not like that scene. I guess they missed the entire point of it and it was cut. The movie, after the whole origin portion of it is done, Darkman uses his fake skin to disguise himself and infiltrate Durant's organization, first using it to frame Paulie by stealing money from Durant, resulting in Paulie being hilariously murdered.
Well, Paulie. Have a nice flight.
And then, as he goes, he learns to do more with the impersonations, even learning to mimic Durant's voice, which is weird because he does not have any lips. There is a weakness, though. Like any superhero, he has a weakness, and his weakness is that the fake skin works fine in the dark, but in the light, the formula breaks down within about 99 minutes, hence why he's called Darkman. I think my favorite scene with the Darkman character is the carnival scene. Like, you know, throughout the movie, you know, Westlake's working on the skin. He's trying to build up the courage to see Julie, and then he does, and they go out to the carnival together. together. He's afraid to tell her that he's horribly burned, so he lies about being in rehab all the time. That's why he can't stick around for too long, and the two do have a nice time until they get to one of the carnival games, and Peyton tries to win her an animal, gets into an argument with the carny, his emotions go a bit haywire, and then he breaks the dude's fingers. I love this shot they use. It's like so good. Like, it's one of my favorite moments in like an action movie ever. I don't know if it's supposed to be dark humor or not, but I laughed. Like, everything from like how the camera just pans over to everyone's reaction, the fucking fingers snapping, and then like after when he's like, take the fucking elephant. The big chase scene with the helicopter at the end is actually pretty good too. It kind of mixes Hollywood action intensity with Raimi's less serious approach to filmmaking.
Excuse me.
Now, Darkman's weaknesses so far are the skin is temporary, he's also crazy and prone to outbursts, but we learn one more weakness of Darkman's, which is exposed when he goes after Strack at the end to save Julie. All it takes for Strack to realize that Robert Durant, in fact, did not survive a fucking helicopter explosion, and yeah, I will address this again later, was just a basic question regarding his personal life. You see, Darkman needs to do his research a bit because he just gets outed immediately.
Oh, by the way, you don't have any kids, Robert?
The climax fight scene is pretty good, not as intense as the helicopter chase, but a fight atop an under-construction skyscraper does make an interesting scene. Strack gets less villain development, which is sad because he is a good villain, he's just not as good as Durant, and I love when he knocks his own guy off the building and just does not give a shit, and also the way he tries to use psychology in the end to save his own ass. It's really a great conclusion.
I know you too well. Dropping me, it's not really an option for you.
And fucking Colin Farrell's voice, like even like regular words that just come out and he sounds like an obnoxious prick. Of course, being a superhero movie in the late 80s, early 90s, it ends on a bittersweet note. Peyton accepts the fact that he can't go back to the way it was and disappears into the crowd, leaving Julie behind forever. He puts on his best Bruce Campbell mask, and that's the end. As a whole, Darkman is just really such a good time. I love it, and it's weird that it didn't take off in a major way. It was sort of a flavor of the month type deal. It didn't fail hard enough to become a cult classic, but it didn't do well enough to become a huge hit either. It's well regarded by those who've seen it, but it's not majorly popular anymore. I personally love this movie. It gets everything right, and it's no wonder Universal gave Raimi all the money in the world to make Army of Darkness a few years later, and how Raimi's career sprang up after this. Yeah, Evil Dead launched his career, Evil Dead 2 saved his career, but Darkman definitely endeared studios enough to get Raimi's foot in the door. Like, without Darkman, there wouldn't have been the Spider-Man trilogy. Despite me liking Darkman, it does have a few flaws that I do wish to point out. For one, while we get the idea that Strack is a scumbag, they really wait until way too late to introduce the aspect of his character, so we don't get to see him do much, despite technically being the main antagonist. Another flaw is, and I'm gonna get shit for this, the movie itself mimics RoboCop in a few ways. It's like too similar, and yes, I know RoboCop was supposed to also be sort of a superhero movie, but let's run it down. Hero is horribly mutilated and tortured by a gang of thugs, check. Hero has inner turmoil regarding the fact that he's been hideously deformed or changed. Despite this, he is determined to see his wife, check. Hero takes revenge on the people who disfigured him, check. Thugs who did this to him actually worked for a corrupt corporate executive, check. Those thugs confront him at an abandoned warehouse, check. Said corrupt corporate executive is working on an extremely extensive and expensive construction project, creating a super gentrified new neighborhood, check and check. Yeah, okay, it's subjective. Both are products of the 80s, where corrupt executives were doing shit like this all the time, and you know, maybe it's predicting Toronto, where corrupt executives are doing this shit all the time. And both movies are standard superhero-based movies, but all in all, the movie's glaring similarities to RoboCop are hard to ignore. But does it take away from the overall quality of the film? No, I still like this movie. It's just something I noticed on a rewatch that I felt I needed to point out to pad this video a bit more. Oh, and speaking of things I didn't notice until this rewatch, this scene where Durant shows up at Strack's office, like, I don't know if Larry Drake's outfit was just not agreeing with the green screen, and this could be the case, but just look at Durant here. Like, he looks like he's chroma keyed into the scene. Could they not get him for this at the same time as Colin Farrell's? It's fucking weird, but the interactions between him and Strack seem proper, so it's not like disjointed or anything, but like it looks like he's just fucking not there. He's superimposed superimposed into the shot. And it really threw me off on the rewatch. And like, granted, I could just look it up, but nah, I'm not gonna do that. I'm just gonna pretend that like they just weren't available at the same time and they both managed to somehow perfectly interact with each other without being in the same room. I had earlier mentioned that Darkman was the result of Sam Raimi not getting to make his Shadow movie. Well, a few years later, Universal released a movie based on The Shadow. It was directed by Russell Mulcahy, the guy who did Highlander, and both of these movies made $48 million at the box office. The big difference is that Darkman was well received and made that money against a budget of $14 million, and The Shadow was not well received and made that money against a budget of $40 million. It's just funny how Sam Raimi managed to make a better superhero movie out of an original concept inspired by The Shadow than the actual movie based on The Shadow. I want to clarify, I actually don't hate The Shadow. I think it gets criticized a little harder than it deserved, but Darkman was the superior Shadow movie. Darkman's success and subsequent fan base resulted in a failed TV pilot that was intended to be an alternate retelling of the first movie. Basically, Durant was the main villain, Julie was killed in the explosion, and Darkman befriends a streetwise black kid and a cop. Didn't get picked up, and yeah, that's fine, the pilot wasn't very good. Now you may ask, Otto, if this movie was so successful and popular, how come it didn't get any sequels? Usually a successful superhero movie gets at least one sequel. Well, Darkman did get 2 sequels, straight-to-video sequels, as was popular at the time. I'm gonna talk about those in another video. But what could become of Darkman now? Is there room for a sequel, a reboot, a remake? I think there's potential, but given that the superhero craze has overloaded the market, a movie wouldn't really work out too well. Maybe, ironically, a TV show would work, but again, there's a lot of those too. It seems the superhero craze is dying down with less overall public interest in Marvel movies and DC not being able to get a running start on anything. So maybe in a few years we'll get a new one or a remake, but Raimi would have to be involved in some capacity or else don't even bother. So that was my take on Darkman. I really like this movie, even if it is one that I don't watch a lot. What are your thoughts on Darkman? Let me know in the comments, and click the like and subscribe button and see the dancing freak. I had a clever line here, but I fucking misread the script. Bye.
I told you everything!
I know, Rick. I know you did.
But let's pretend you didn't.